Snow drifted down slow and steady, soft as falling ash, as if the world itself had gone quiet to let one woman pass unseen. Her name was Martha Hale, and she was running, white dress torn, hem caked with mud, breath ragged in the mountain cold. Each step broke a crust of ice that whispered her shame back at her. They said she weren't fit to be loved. The town of Dry Hollow had laughed loud enough for the whole prairie to hear when her groom, Eli Turner, turned his back at the altar. His hat still in hand, his smirk still on his lips, he'd said in front of everyone, "I can't marry a woman built like a plow mule." The church walls had echoed with laughter. Even the pastor looked away. Martha had stood frozen, veil trembling, face burning, until the laughter turned to pity. And pity was worse than mockery. So she ran. Out the door, past the dusty street, through the hills, until the town lights vanished behind her and the cold began to bite. The storm came fast that night. By dusk, snow clung to her lashes, and the thin shoes she'd worn for her wedding were stiff with frost. She followed the river by sound alone, praying for light, for smoke, for anything. And just as the world dimmed into nothing, she saw it. A faint orange flicker through the trees. When she stumbled toward it, half conscious, she saw a cabin nestled in pine shadows, smoke curling from a stone chimney. The door opened before she could knock. A man filled the doorway, broad shoulders, coat lined with fur, face rough-hewn from years of weather and solitude. Calder Boone, the mountain called him later, though that night he was just a stranger with calm eyes and a steady voice. "You'll sleep in my bed tonight," he said simply. His tone was plain, not suggestive, just certain. Martha froze, clutching her coat around her. Shame and fear tangled inside her. He nodded toward the hearth. "Ain't no place for a woman on the floor in this cold." Too tired to protest, she let him guide her inside. The warmth hit like mercy. The cabin was small. One cot, a wooden table, a fire that burned clean. He set a quilt around her shoulders, ladled stew into a bowl, and placed it in her hands without a word. She tried to speak, but her throat closed. Tears came uninvited, slipping down her face into the broth. "Rest," he said quietly, turning away to the fire. "You can tell me your name in the morning." When dawn came, she woke under a heavy wool blanket, the scent of pine and smoke thick in the air. Calder was outside chopping wood, breath rising in steady clouds. His movements were sure, measured, like a man used to silence. She sat up, the quilt still wrapped around her, noticing the single plate, the single chair, the quiet order of his life. When he came in, he set down a tin mug of coffee. "You eat first," he said. "You can't keep me here," she murmured, voice hoarse. He glanced at her, not unkindly. "Didn't say I would. But you'll stay till you can stand again." Their eyes met briefly, hers defensive, his unreadable. The days blurred after that. She mended his shirts, swept the floor, stirred the stew pot. He fixed the roof, chopped more wood. They worked in the kind of silence that says more than talk ever could. Sometimes she caught him watching her, not with judgment but with quiet curiosity, as though trying to remember what company felt like. When her hands shook from the cold, he showed her how to split kindling with one clean stroke. His hands brushed hers, rough and gentle all at once. "You got a good heart for work," he said one afternoon. She turned away quickly, swallowing the lump in her throat. No one ever said that before. The mountain changed her slowly. The air was clean, the nights long, and the quiet unbroke except for the wind and the crackle of fire. The ache in her chest began to fade, replaced by something steady, something that almost felt like peace. One day a trapper passed by the cabin bringing supplies and news from Dry Hollow. Calder traded furs for salt and coffee while Martha stayed hidden behind the curtain. "You hear?" the man said. "The big bride's gone missing." "Town says she ran off ashamed." Calder's jaw tightened. "Reckon the town should mind its own." The trapper laughed and rode off. Martha stepped out from behind the curtain, her face pale. "You should have told him I was here." "Ain't nobody's business who finds warmth in my cabin," Calder said simply, pouring coffee into his cup. That night, she cried quietly under the quilt, careful not to let him hear. but the firelight flickered in his eyes as he sat awake in the chair, pretending to sleep. Days later, when she looked in the small, cracked mirror by the window, she barely recognized herself. Her face was fuller but alive. Her hair was brushed, her eyes no longer hollow. She wasn't beautiful by the world's measure, but she was no longer invisible. And as she sewed a patch into his shirt one evening, the light from the fire soft on her hands, Calder looked up from his whittling. "Sometimes the kindest thing a man can do," he said softly, "is let a heart heal where no one's looking." She smiled faintly, the first real smile since her wedding day, and the wind outside seemed to still, like the mountain itself was listening. Spring came slow that year, soft as a sigh. The snow thinned into mist, dripping from the eaves in silver threads. Martha stood at the cabin's doorway, apron dusted with flour, watching sunlight spill over the pines. Her body had changed, not thinner, but steadier. Her steps carried purpose. The woman who'd stumbled through that blizzard months ago had vanished into the thaw. Inside, Calder Boone was repairing a saddle strap, quiet as always. His beard had grown, his eyes gentler now. Martha had learned the rhythm of his silence, each pause, each nod, each way he said care without saying words. Sometimes she caught him studying her as if memorizing the peace she brought. He'd say things like, "That stew smells like home," or "You hum the way sunlight feels." And she never knew how to answer. But she'd smile, and that was enough. Still, when she caught her reflection in the small mirror, a shadow passed through her chest. She saw not beauty but memory, the laughter, the whispers of Dry Hollow. The words, "Big Bride," still clung somewhere deep, though fainter now, like a scar after healing. One afternoon, the distant thud of hooves broke the quiet. Calder straightened, his hand stilling on the leather strap. A rider appeared through the trees. Sheriff Lane, hat low, horse-breathing steam. "Mornin', Boone," the sheriff said. His eyes shifted to Martha standing in the doorway. "Town's been asking about a woman gone missing. Bride left at her own wedding. You seen anyone fit the talk?" Calder's jaw flexed. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then Martha stepped forward. "I'm her," she said quietly. "But I ain't missing." "I'm found," the sheriff blinked. "Ma'am, the Turners want this settled proper. They're saying you ran off with his things." Calder took one step forward, voice calm but firm. "She don't owe that man a damn thing." "Careful, Boone," the sheriff warned. "Law might see it different." "Law can ride back to town," Calder said. "There's no crime in staying where you're safe." The sheriff studied them both, then tipped his hat. "Well, maybe not, but folks'll talk." When he left, the silence returned heavy as snow. Martha's hands trembled as she poured water into the kettle. "He's right," she whispered. "They'll come, and I can't let you get caught up in my shame." Calder looked at her, the firelight cutting across his face. "Ain't shame if it's the truth, Martha. You were wronged. You got nothing to hide." That night she packed her small bag. Her hands shook. Folding the few things she owned, a brush, a thread spool, the piece of lace from her wedding dress she'd kept as a reminder of who she never wanted to be again. When she turned, Calder was standing in the doorway. "You helped me stand again," she said softly. "But I can't let you be blamed for me." He leaned on the frame, silent for a long time. Then his voice, low and steady. "You ain't heavy, Martha." "Not the way that word means. Stay if you want." Her throat tightened. "Nobody's ever wanted me to stay." He looked down at the floor, then back at her. "Then I reckon it's about time someone did." The quiet between them swelled, gentle, enormous. She set the bag down, unfolded the dress, and placed it neatly on the table. "I'll stay till the mountain says otherwise." Days later, the sound of horses returned, but this time harsher, angrier. When she peeked out the window, her blood went cold. Eli Turner rode up with 2 men, guns slung low, arrogance high. "Well, well," Eli sneered, dismounting. "Heard you got something of mine, Boone." Calder stepped outside, coat unbuttoned, hands calm at his sides. "Don't recall you ever owning a woman," Eli laughed. "She's my wife-to-be. Ran off before vows, shamed my name. I'm here to take what's mine." Martha's heart pounded. She stepped out beside Calder, voice shaking but clear. You left me there, Eli. Left me to drown in your laughter. I ain't your anything, Eli's smirk faltered. Look at you dressed like a servant in a mountain shack. You think this man wants you? You're a fool, Calder's voice dropped, low as thunder. You best ride before I forget my manners. Eli's men shifted uneasily. The mountain air felt thick, ready to break. But Calder didn't reach for his gun. He didn't need to. The weight in his eyes was enough. A man who'd buried too many things already and wouldn't hesitate to bury one more. Eli spat at the ground. Keep the fat fool, then. He swung onto his horse, muttered something ugly, and rode off into the trees. When the sound of hooves faded, Martha crumpled to the porch steps, shaking. I thought I'd never stand up to him, she whispered. Calder knelt beside her, his hands hovering, unsure. You didn't just stand, Martha, he said softly. You rose. Her breath hitched. He brushed a tear from her cheek, gentle as a leaf falling. Their eyes met. No rush, no claim, just quiet knowing. In that moment, something wordless passed between them. Respect, gratitude, maybe even love. But love so still it didn't need a name. Outside, the wind moved through the pines. Inside, the cabin glowed with firelight and calm. Spring deepened into summer. Wildflowers rose where snow once lay. The cabin changed, too. Martha planted herbs by the window, fixed new curtains, filled the air with laughter that hadn't been heard in years. Calder built a second chair, though he never said why. When she laughed now, it was easy. When she sang, it was free. The world might still whisper her name with mockery, but she no longer cared. The mountain had taken her shame and buried it deep beneath the thaw. Sometimes, in the quiet of evening, they'd sit side by side on the porch watching the sky turn to gold. He'd tell her stories from before the war. She'd tell him dreams she'd never dared to speak aloud. And when words ran out, the silence between them said everything. The voice of the old narrator closes the story softly. The mountain took her hurt and gave her back her name, not as the bride who was left, but as the woman who stayed. Maybe love ain't about who finds you beautiful. It's about who helps you forget you ever doubted it. The wind moves through the pines once more, gentle as breath. The camera lingers on the two of them in the fading light, Martha and Calder side by side, quiet, whole, and finally home.